Good morning. My name is Jerry Brady, and I'm a member of the Sangha. I was fortunate enough to be able to invite to Boise David Bro, who's with us this morning. I learned about David from the good people who are forging the most compassionate city in America, by their own description, Louisville. And they said, would we have a man who's doing a nationwide tour on behalf of compassion, and he's going to be speaking in 12 cities in 12 months. Would you like him? I said yes. And he can stay with me. So he is. He's here for the month of June. He'll tell you a little bit about how he got started and where he's come through and where he's going. I can tell you, we'd established last night, he has no 401k. He has no retirement whatsoever. And he is truly serving compassion as his boss and his own heart. So I'll let David speak for himself. David Bro.
I am grateful to be here with you all this morning. Grateful. I am currently on a compassion tour, as Jerry said. I started this September 3rd, 2014, going to different communities asking people to share their written concept of the word compassion in a notebook. And this is a result of something that I began in Davis, California on June 3rd, 2009, after a personal calling to bring awareness to compassion. I was asking myself, what is compassion? And I was dissatisfied with trying to come up with that answer by myself. I was living in a studio in 2008 and by myself, and wanted to explore what it meant for someone to exercise his or her spirit. I think we are mind, body, and spirit. And I had exercised my mind by attending Stanford as an undergraduate. I had exercised the body by exercising the body. I asked myself, what does it mean to exercise one's spirit? And I read books and I watched YouTube videos about mystics and masters and saints and sages, and came across Karen Armstrong's video about compassion. After watching that, I got a pen and a notepad and tried to just write what I thought compassion is in that first notebook, and decided to go around the community of Oakland, California at the time where I was living, and to come up with a collective definition. And in doing so, I found something very powerful happening. There was engagement around a value and virtue that I come to cherish in my heart. I was relinquishing a lot of my material goods at the time after going through about a year and a half of discovering who am I and what am I to do, based on knowing that who am I within my own heart. I went through a surrendering period of 3 weeks where I laid on my back outside of eating and sleeping and doing the errands that I needed to do to take care of myself. The rest of the day was spent in a state of surrender, in which I asked the higher self, what is it that you would like for me to do? And the answer was to continue to take the pen and the notepad and ask people about compassion, and at the time it was the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. I thought to myself, you want me to go around and take this pen and a notepad and ask people about compassion? And the answer was yes. And there was a portion of myself that I refer to as the ego that said, no, no, no. And the Spirit said yes, yes, yes. And over that 3-week period, I finished giving away the material goods. I finished sifting through most of the negative material thoughts that were going through my head, and I blessed them and sent them on their way, said, there is no more use for you anymore. And I took a vow in May of 2009 to make this a lifelong endeavor, to continue asking people about compassion. And 20,000 inquiries and 10,000 entries later, after starting on June 3rd, 2009, I'm here with you today. And after this, I will offer the opportunity for you to share your concept of the word compassion in what is now the 6th notebook. What I would like to do is to generate an energy of compassion, is to hear what people hear, how you would answer that question yourself. What is compassion to you? What does that mean to you? And I'll offer a few moments for you to contemplate what that is, and when you would like to share, speak freely from your heart.
For me, it's being present.
I guess I would describe it as sharing someone else's common experience in their most vulnerable moments.
I think it's loving something until it becomes whole or healed.
I think it's putting yourself in another person's shoes and seeing from their perspective what they're going through.
Putting yourself in someone else's shoes is what was said. Thank you.
About fearless love. That's what comes to my mind. Openness, courage, and empathy for others and self.
I think it's an action to care for the earth.
I was always afraid of compassion because I felt so much sorrow about people suffering, and I was afraid to open my heart to compassion. So my whole kind of involvement with the Buddhist path has been one of that question, you know, what is compassion? How is it different from sorrow? And I feel like what I've been learning is that compassion is a more sturdy love, a courageous love, a wise love that's somehow able to, it's not sadness. And as a Tibetan Lama told me one time, he said, your sadness doesn't help anyone. We must be strong. So a strong love is what I've been learning.
After having spent time in a home for people with dementia and Alzheimer's disease, visiting my mother in the last couple of weeks, I think I've gotten a lesson in compassion, and I would go on with the idea that it is strong and that it is action. I felt like I saw compassion in action in ways that was really unself-conscious, and that's what I loved about it. I don't know that the people would have described themselves as compassionate. They just were, you know, they were very, very kind and loving, and at the same time, not, I don't know what the right word is, but not, at the same time, requiring things that needed to be required, let's put it that way, from people who needed to have boundaries imposed on them sometimes.
Compassion for me is service service to people that are injured, taking their shoes off and washing their feet, and healing the pain that they have, the homeless, those that don't have what I have.
I think for me, compassion is in some ways learning how to completely open myself up to another, to try to connect my spirit with their spirit, no matter who they are, letting go of any kind of judgments and having a real love and care for them that maybe I don't even sometimes know is possible to have for another, but learning to open oneself up so that there is that kind of connection.
I think compassion is bearing witness to whatever is, and I also see it in some ways as the flip side of joy. In other words, when somebody is experiencing joy, being able to experience that joy with them. Compassion involves bearing witness to their sorrow, bearing witness to their suffering, and experiencing that in the same.
I think compassion is kind of this passion for the spirit that is embodied in various species and entities, and recognizing that spirit in yourself and in others, and having that core word of passion and compassion, the passion to nourish and support that spirit self.
The first thing that came to my mind was understanding what someone else is going through and having a heartfelt wish that they be okay.
For me, compassion really has to do with walking down the path of suffering with that person. And that has given me great happiness to do that, whether it's somebody who I know or who I don't know. I had a friend that had a very serious health issue, so I was constantly with them, meditating with them, being with them, speaking with them, and months later, I found out that that person was okay. She made it through it. To be there with people, that human dialogue really is critical. It has helped me tremendously to be happy.
I think compassion is helping, healing, teaching, caring, without judgment and comparison.
I think being able to be there for other people and animals, regardless of the situation, and how it impacts me and how it makes me feel.
For me, compassion is, if I'm full of myself, it's difficult for me to have compassion. So compassion would be emptying myself, coming from being empty.
I've gone over most of the responses, and people often ask me, because of the extent of reading the entries and knowing what I do. In Davis, I was somewhat of a sheet therapist, and people would come up after discovering what I do and being a figure in Davis after the evolution of what happened there in Davis. And people often ask me to define that question for myself, and I offer it as information in what I've discovered, and that compassion starts with listening, and that's to listen as compassionately, as non-judgmental, to being that space for another to express him or herself, or the earth to express itself in its own natural way, or anything to express itself in its own natural way, to be that space to receive that. And by doing that, to acknowledge it. That's the second part. There are 4 parts that I found. First is listening. Second is acknowledging, because I believe when you acknowledge someone, they are more apt to share. When you acknowledge the planet is more apt to share of its nourishment, of its own being. The third part is mutual understanding. And when I first started to contemplate compassion, I only used the word understanding, and then I thought, it's a little bit nicer to have mutual understanding. And I think there are exceptions when someone used an example of, if someone's laying on the ground unconscious, it's less mutual because the individual or the animal or that thing is unable to respond. And the fourth component is action. I think there's an action that's needed in order to help alleviate suffering. And the beauty about listening and acknowledging and understanding is those things themselves become an action without actually being as assertive as one may think that he or she needs to be in relation to what compassion is. Those 4 components are 4 of the most shared entries that people have written. And I've stayed awake till 3 in the morning sometimes, feeling this download of information coming and this upload of information from the heart, and that's what I currently believe compassion to involve. My own foundation at the moment is I believe compassion is recognizing essence. After a long journey in discovering and contemplating compassion, I met a friend who said to keep it simple. When I first started writing what my concept of compassion is, she's a Swami at an ashram in San Ramon, and she said to keep it simple. And I had this long academic sort of cognitive paragraph, and she read it, and she's like, too long. And I had contemplated down to, over the years, to recognizing essence. And the essence of being human is that we need food, and to offer a compassionate act to offer food to another. That's the essence of being human. And through contemplating this, I've taken it down into the depths of what essence, recognizing essence is. And I strongly believe that it is the recognition of our own essence that becomes the love that shines so brightly that anything and everything that comes within that presence experiences compassion. And there's a healing that's done. And there's a essence that's discovered by another because one has recognized his or her own essence. And that brings inner peace. That is the inner peace that lies within all of us. And the other download that I received, I feel there are downloads that I receive when I wake up 3 o'clock in the morning. You know those downloads at 3 in the morning. You don't know where they come from, they just come. Is the cycle of inner peace, compassion, forgiveness, and gratitude. Is once this inner peace is established through prayer, through meditation, through service, through whatever means, that it becomes the foundation of living. It's the light and the love that is within everyone's heart. And that leads to compassion. So if you see someone that needs help, you see an animal that needs help, you see the earth that needs help, there's this instant spontaneous reaction to it, that's a response to it, or reaction that is a compassionate response. And that leads to anything that needs to be forgiven is forgiven, because the only thing that you have to offer is compassion. I think Wayne Dyer uses an example of when you squeeze an orange, all you get out of the orange is orange juice. When you squeeze someone that has discovered a love and light and inner peace within themselves, you squeeze them with anger, resentment, animosity, anything that needs healing. All you get is compassion, and all you get is forgiveness. And the challenge, I think, is to turn that forgiveness into gratitude, to be grateful for the experience of a divorce, to be grateful for an experience of a lost friendship, to be grateful for an experience of having cancer, to be grateful for all those things. Because what happens is that it fuels the inner peace, such that there's this tremendous amount of growth of inner peace that continuously happens throughout one's life. That's the download. Inner peace to compassion, to forgiveness, to gratitude. And it's a circular feedback, I believe, that once that inner peace is established in your heart, that's all you have to offer all the time, all the time, all the time. With that, I would like to open it up to any last inquiries before we finish up here today. Perfect timing. Any last inquiries? Again, I will be here with the notebook if you like to share your written concept of the word compassion in the notebook. be in the back question.
So how many different cities have you done this in, and what cities have you done this?
I started September 3rd in Burlington, Vermont. I went to Lodi, New Jersey. No, I started in Keene Valley, New York. I went to Burlington, Vermont, Lodi, New Jersey, Louisville, Kentucky, and then it started to get cold, so I went to Tampa, Florida for December, and Austin, Texas, San Antonio, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Nashville, Tennessee, Carlsbad, California, and currently here until the end of the month. After this, I go to Portland, Oregon, and then Seattle, Washington, and because people have found out about who I am and what I've been doing, there have been subsequent invitations to other places.
What's your experience been like? What really stands out for you as far as what you have experienced in your travels?
The beauty of people and the necessity for compassion. When I was in Davis, as I said, I was a street therapist. And as I was traveling, I thought, I wonder if people would come up to me and instantly start sharing their deepest concerns about their life. And yes, it happened that everywhere I've gone, there's people are like, oh, there's a compassion man in town. Let me go find him. I need to talk to him. and most of the places I've gone to, the hosts have gained something from being able to express themselves. That people that I actually have stayed with it. I don't know if it's happened yet with the current host.
Could you share a story? Because some of us like to live vicariously.
A story about the tour?
Just a personal story of one of your encounters.
Sure, yes. I'll share the story. I did this talk last night, and I'll share that story because I love this story. I stood at one corner in Davis for the 5 years. It became known as the Compassion Corner. And there was a book that I was able to self-publish and an actual monument to compassion that's there. It's a earth bench that can sit about 10 to 12 people, and it has the ceramics on it with compassion. It became known as the Compassion Corner, and one day, what happens at the corner is that I asked people about compassion, and they would come by, and some people would need to think about it. Some people would come back either an hour later or the next day or a week later. There was a young man that came by a year later. He was in his early 20s, and he was with a young lady who was the same age, and I asked him, would you care to share your written concept of the word compassion in a notebook? And he said, you asked me that question a year ago, and I didn't know what the answer was, and I came back to write something. And he referred to the young lady. He said, it's because I've fallen in love with this woman. And my heart jumped when I heard that. And I thought that, in my mind, I thought that this man needed to discover what love is first before he understood what compassion is. I gave him the notebook, and he wrote what he believed compassion to be. And he said, thank you for doing what you do here at the corner. And I said, thank you for writing your concept. And he went on. And I've contemplated this event a lot because of the fact that it took him a while to discover what compassion is. And it took him his own personal journey of discovering what love is, his own movement towards his own inner peace, his own light, to be able to express in writing what compassion is. That's one of probably about 100 different stories I can share about what life has been like the last 6 years because of a surrender process to compassion.
When you were preparing and you spoke of laying on your back alone, do you think there's a cleansing or an individual component? I think of the guru on the hill that you have to climb to and talk to him, that makes it clearer for you how to express compassion with others.
Yes. There was a cleansing and a recognition of mind in which the heart was able to express itself because of this clutter. And within everyone's heart there is compassion and love.
Do you feel that you can just go out there and seek without any kind of a preconceived definition, that you won't be open to negativity? If you're truly seeking compassion, that an open heart will be nourished in this crazy world that we're in?
Yes.
Thank you.
Because then that's all you have to offer. That's all you have to offer. And what happens is that you dip into history such that you become an example through your life of what it means to be love and compassion.
What have you learned about compassion when you're having to deal with someone you have a lot of conflict with, and a lot of difficulty with? In fact, they may be harming yourself or others in what they do.
This is a.
So how do you dig deep for compassion when you're dealing with somebody that you have difficulty with,
Mm-hmm.
and that you have, you're in conflict with because they may be hurting you, yourself, or others? How do you deal with that?
I hear you.
What are some thoughts that you might have on that?
I always remember what Thich Nhat Hanh says this, is anyone that is causing you pain is experiencing pain. Suffering themselves. The only way to express pain is by experiencing, being in that state of pain. And that's when the compassion can come. And you can say to yourself, if someone is angry, that person is experiencing anger. And your heart can recognize the essence of that person as love. The authentic self of that person is love. And to be a reflection of that, to become a mirror of that. Allow the anger to